Now listen up. It's about the Constitution, about Washington, D.C. It's about our God and country, about our liberty. It's about our independence. It's about the IRS for the USA.
As well, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. In case it slipped your mind, that is Article 1 of the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution. God bless America. Join me now, ladies and gentlemen, will you please, as we salute our colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, would you remain standing, please, and join me in this opening moment of silence for the victims of the Oklahoma City bombing and for those brave patriots who made the supreme sacrifice 50 years ago today, as we recall together as Americans VE Day. Amen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this convention called Taking Back America. I am the Prince of Darkness, the principal purveyor of paranoia, and the host of the Ron Fortner Show on KESQ Radio. There will be a pop quiz tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Who's here? Who are the veterans of World War II? Would you stand, please? And what about the veterans of the Forgotten War? The Korean War. Are you here? And what of you warriors of the Vietnam War? Ladies and gentlemen, in all sincerity, you're to be commended for being here today, especially for your uncommon good sense and intelligent discernment for getting your tickets early that guarantee that you are here. For those of you who are viewing us over closed circuit video in an adjoining venue, it's almost as good as being here, and it's probably twice as cool. Thank you all for coming. Your presence today is a testimonial, a living testimonial, to the value that we invest in our First Amendment freedom. Probably every one of you who are here today are coming with a different expectation of what you'll go home with in the next 5.5 hours. You may come seeking kindred spirits, and you surely will find them here if you consider the title of the convention, Taking Back America. For those of you who have simply come out of curiosity, it should be worth the price of admission so far. And you ain't seen nothing yet. For you folks who are in opposition to what we are about today, by the way, where are our good friends from NOW, the National Organization of Women? Did I not see your banner floating around here a moment ago? Never mind. For those of you who may be here in contradiction of the spirit of this convention, please know that you are welcome, as long as you behave yourself. More about that in a moment. May I take these first few moments, though, to explain the ground rules. First of all, no cameras other than the ones that are already here, or recording equipment of any kind will be permitted during this convention. Why? Because we're afraid of our message getting to the outside world? No. We're afraid, and we have demonstrable proof that our message does not get out to the rest of the world through mainstream media without it being savaged and butchered first. So that's our first line of defense. And for those of you who are already listening and watching with crossed legs, there'll be a potty break after our first two speakers, during which time we will also allow enough time in a 30-minute break that you can refresh yourself. And I would urge you at that particular moment to take advantage of the fine services of the Palm Springs Hilton and Mr. Aftad Dada's fine staff, who have shown enormous courage in allowing this convention to go forward. I must tell you, though, that this is the first time since 1972, when I covered the 42nd Motion Picture Academy Awards in Hollywood, that I was brought anywhere through the pantry and the back door. It sort of is demeaning to the spirit, if you know what I mean. Following the 30-minute break, and following, of course, every speaker this afternoon, there will be a question and answer period. Understand, please, this is not a news conference. This is not a debate. Please, one question each, and please, double please, restrain the impulse to make this a personal forum with statements. We will and we must be finished by 7 p.m. And a final caveat: whether you have come out of commitment or curiosity, out of support or opposition, you are welcome. If you came here to create a distraction or an interruption, you are not welcome. In any way, if you intend to interrupt these proceedings, please be aware that measures have been taken to stop you. If you feel impelled to attempt to disrupt these proceedings, we have no hesitation in asking security, that which you can see and that which you cannot see, to ask them to assist you to find other environments that are more suitable for your intentions. Ladies and gentlemen, I reluctantly refrain a question asked by an erstwhile wannabe reporter in the Morning Fish Wrap. What does the title of this convention mean? Taking back America from whom? I respectfully submit, from a bloated bureaucracy that has grown out of control, insensitive and indifferent to the needs and will of the people. Taking America back from a political hierarchy that is corrupted by multinational greed that places profit above the well-being of all Americans. And from international globalists who regard our sovereignty as an inconvenience to their agenda of universal rule. And quite frankly and painfully, from the apathy of ordinary Americans who, through their apathy and neglect, have allowed these evils to flourish. Now, enough about me. What do you think about me? It is my pleasure and honor to introduce you to our first speaker of the afternoon. She represents an organization known by the acronym of CALL. I don't know her well enough to know whether or not that makes her a call girl, and perhaps we can talk about that after the program is finished. CALL is an organization that stands for Citizens Against Legal Loopholes, recently formed, originated in 1990 It gelled in 1993 as a legal reform, a citizens' legal reform group. It has a membership nationwide of at least 1,000. It internets with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of other like-minded Americans all across the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Ms. Charlene Alden.
Thank you.
I hate that when it happens.
Good afternoon. This is absolutely wonderful, and it's quite a pleasure to be here with you today. I feel a little bit like a warm-up act with such other prominent speakers as Ted Gunderson, Mark Cornicky, and Steve Voss. Yesterday, Janet Reno on C-SPAN called for all Americans to step up and band together and fight this thing. Well, Janet, thanks for the advice. We are banding together. We're all here, and we're all going to fight this thing. This thing is an out-of-control government. It is now time for open hearings and investigations into what power and authority the Department of Justice is operating under. We gave Congress 18 powers. From those 18 powers, we now have over 3 million pages of codes, rules, regulations, and laws being administered by the Department of Justice. That is the equivalent of over 150,000 pages for each of the powers granted by we the people under the Constitution. Last year alone, 67,000. That's 67,000 pages of new laws were imposed on we the people, while exempting themselves under the color of the law. Congress apparently thinks justice is spelled J-U-S-T-U-S, just us, not you. Frederick Bastiat declared, "The law perverted, and the police powers of the state perverted along with it." The law not only turned from its proper purpose, but made to follow an entirely contrary purpose. The law has become the weapon of every kind of greed. Instead of checking crime, the law itself is guilty of the evils it is supposed to punish. If this is true, it is a serious fact, and it is my moral duty, requires me to call this to the attention of my fellow citizens. Well, enough is enough. Now is not the time to back off. In 1857, Frederick Douglass left us these historic words: "Find out just what the people will submit to, and you will have found out exactly the amount of injustice and wrongdoing which will be imposed upon them." And this will continue until they are resisted by either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Perhaps the recent tragic events in Oklahoma are the results of having found out exactly the amount of injustice and wrongdoing that has been imposed upon the people and has finally come to blows. No matter what the reason or who actually caused that bombing of the federal building, we must now seek a peaceful, lawful solution. We must not allow the government and the media to make the word patriot a four-letter word. President Teddy Roosevelt said that patriotism means to stand by your country. It does not mean to stand by the president, and it does not mean to stand by public officials. We now are at the 11th hour. We can no longer allow the foxes, Congress, to design the chicken coops one more time. Such acts as H.R. 666, the Exclusionary Rule Reform Act of 1995, which totally violates the protection of our Fourth Amendment, and H.R. 97, which creates a rapid deployment strike force, coupled with Senate Bill 390, the counterterrorism bill. I don't know what you think about this, but it scares the hell out of me. If it looks like tyranny, and it acts like tyranny, it must be tyranny. Senator Arlen, has called for investigations into Waco and the possible, they haven't done it yet, they're talking about it, and the possible excessive force by the ATF. But as we all know, as in Whitewater, Waco, Weaver, and many other investigations by the government, it seems that they never find any wrongdoing on their part. Research done by Gene Schroeder and others on the Trading with the Enemy Act, as amended on March 9th, 1933, led call to do further research into the executive branch, and more specifically, into the Department of Justice and its role in the whole scheme of things. Now is the time for all of us to be the glue that connects the dots to create the platform for much needed change in the Department of Justice. Hear, hear. In that spirit, CALL, Citizens Against Legal Loopholes, and 1,000 other legal reform organizations nationwide have banded together to petition Congress for open hearings and investigations into the Department of Justice and the Trading with the Enemy Act. The press says that there is no conspiracy, and I say they're right. It's all out in the open. It really has been. It's like a puzzle that has 1,000 pieces, and when it's separated and you ask someone, can you see the picture? They say, no, that doesn't mean the picture doesn't exist. We will connect those dots and expose this. To understand the trading with the enemy is very important. So to start with, in President Andrew Johnson's veto message of the Reconstruction Act that placed the nation under martial law, reads in part as follows, and I quote, "I submit to Congress that this measure is without precedence and without authority, and it is in conflict with the plainest provision of our Constitution and utterly destructive to the great principles of our liberty. The authority here amounts to absolute despotism. Such a power has not been wielded by any monarchy in England for more than 500 years. This bill, in a time of peace, makes martial law operate as if we were in actual war. Ladies and gentlemen, despite President Johnson's veto message, the Reconstruction Act was passed, and martial law fell upon our land. It remains in effect over we the people today." The following excerpts are from April 1870 Congressional Globe, which is now the Congressional Record, concerning H.R. 1328, establishing the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice was to carry out martial law nearly 5 years after the end of the Civil War. Congressman Lawrence stated, "This bill," this is very important, "does transfer to the Department of Justice all subjects of martial law and all subjects of military law." Section 8 of that bill provided that the Attorney General is empowered to make all necessary rules and regulations for our government. That bill accomplished one great purpose, and this is a quote, of bringing into that department, the Department of Justice, the whole legal service of the government. This was a necessary step to bring the President into the position of dictator over America. Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a perpetual state of declared national emergency and at war with the enemy. If you want to know who the enemy is, look in the mirror. Congressman Beck stated in the Congressional Record, "When the President declares a national emergency, our Constitution is suspended. The majority of the people in the United States have lived all of their lives under a national emergency. For over 60 years, our freedoms, guaranteed by the Constitution, have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by a state of national emergency. And you now know why we must demand open hearings and investigations into the Department of Justice and the Trading with the Enemy Act. It all comes from there, what is happening." Well, enough of the bad news and on to the solution. These are extraordinary times, and extraordinary things must come about. In the past few years, our country has taken a giant step towards James Madison's greatest fear, that when the accumulation of power within all three branches of the government, the legislative, the judicial, and the executive, are in the same hands, then tyranny will follow. Those who now wield that power are the attorneys and our executive branch, who, in effect, have created a government of the people, by the judges, for the attorneys. You mean that's been in my face the whole time? Where? All right. While there are many good and honest and ethical professionals in the justice system, our current spirituality and productive capabilities are being undermined by a legal system that has become a law unto itself. Millions, and I do mean millions, of Americans are crying out for legal justice reform. I'm sure by the time this whole thing is over, O.J. Simpson will be screaming for legal justice reform in spite of everything else. In this spirit, CALL is sponsoring a national demonstration for much needed legal reform. Ignite the Spirit has made its debut in San Diego February 25th as the first step of a 20-city major demonstration towards Capitol Hill. Simply put, the time for open hearings and investigations is now. If equal justice is to be returned to the American citizen, it must come from the grassroots. That is each one of you. I owe it to you, you owe it to me, and we owe it to our grandchildren, our children, and the future generations if a peaceful, lawful solution to what plagues our nation is to be accomplished. Our forefathers petitioned in the most humblest of terms, and we too must exercise our First Amendment rights to petition our government for redress of grievances. To both the Congress and our fourth branch of government, the county and federal grand juries, we will deliver a mandate. Terry Sanders, who is the executive director of CALL, will now go over that mandate. Terry? Once again, our sole agenda is open hearings. Petition and mandates are nothing new. We understand that organizations have sent as many as 8 million signatures, ignored. Truckloads. Often in the past, petition and mandates have been connected to lawsuits, class action lawsuits. This is everyone's legal issue. Once the hearings are underway, we can probe such issues as NAFTA, GATT, the Federal Reserve, the 16th Amendment, the UN, our sovereignty, executive orders, the jury system, family law, which is a disgrace, billable hours, That's really what it all comes down to, billable hours. Tort law, bankruptcy, another national disgrace. More people last year filed bankruptcy than entered college in this country. On Labor Day weekend, Sunday, September 3rd, 1995, we the people will exercise our rights and demonstrate in Washington. It will be simultaneously broadcast from Washington, Colorado, and California. The assembly will feature both prominent speakers and big-name entertainers. We have been talking to Willie Nelson about appearing in Washington. And in Hollywood, at very least, we can get Zsa Zsa and she can slap them all. On the following Tuesday, September 5th, we will present to Congress the petition and mandate with an estimated 10 million signatures. Thank you. That is not an easy task. We need you all. There are petitions out there. Please take them home, Xerox them. You do not have to be a registered voter. We're not running for office. On the contrary, we're trying to remove them from office. So we do need help with the 10 million signatures. Now, to the good part. Anticipation of Congress's failing to draft the mandate resolution within 30 days and submit it to we the people, we have implemented Gun Down with Paper, right along with Operation Ignite the Spirit's petition drive. This is a 2-page, one-suit-fits-all lawsuit against the members of Congress and the federal and county grand juries individually and in their official capacity for failure to uphold their oath of office as mandated. This is not a class action suit, and our goal is 2 million lawsuits. It simply comes from signing the petition. That's it. It isn't complicated. It isn't 500 pages. We're not putting ourselves into a legal arena with, IRS. It is simply for failure to uphold their oath of office under the First Amendment. Do we or do we not have a Constitution? These lawsuits will be filed in pro se, in pauperis, requiring no legal fees, in the U.S. Court of Common Claims Court in Washington, D.C. There will be no filing fees and costs to participate in Operation Ignite the Spirit. If they deny us our status, we will bring up the bankruptcy of the United States of America, which they don't like talking about, but we will bring it to an issue. Now, a problem came up. How do you get 2 million lawsuits to Washington? Well, the answer is, on the 31st day, a constitutional caravan with 2 semi-trucks filled with 2 million lawsuits will be escorted from San Diego, California, on a 15-day caravan across the United States of America. Radio talk shows and a full media blitz will make it impossible for Capitol Hill not to know we're coming to gun them down with paper. The petition, we're also putting together a task force. This is where you can help. The petition and mandates open hearings and investigations into the Department of Justice. Therefore, Congress must be placed on notice, individually and in their official capacity, prior to the petition and mandate and the lawsuits being filed. A task force will be going to Washington to present the facts and evidence to put them on notice. One such case is the Inslaw case, directly involving the Department of Justice, as well as the unconstitutional acts of 666. We also have a case prepared against the Bar Association for RICO. These cases need to be presented to each and every member of Congress, so we need people who are willing to go to Congress. We anticipate in groups of 3, doing 12 congressmen a day. They will be left the suits. They will be also left papers to respond in 30 days. This is not a joke. This is a serious legal move. Enough is enough. If you would like to be a part of this Washington task force and have a case prepared with fraud and corruption, please contact us at the following number, which is down here, and it's area code 619-755-9319. You can also get information at the table. We have had several militias endorse the peaceful, lawful solution, and we invite other militias to join us. Thank you, and God bless. If there are any questions, we'll take questions. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. I applaud you. All of you.
It should be clearly evident now by the caliber of our last speaker that your voice of dissent is being heard in literally hundreds of thousands of venues all across the United States. It is being heard through articulate spokesmen who are intelligent, who are well-versed in the issues of the day, and who are unafraid at this point. The gentleman raised an interesting question. What about previous efforts that have ended in key personnel being either indicted or disgraced? They can't lock us all up, can they? Now, is Steve Voss on the premise? All right. Obviously, Steve's reputation precedes him, and he won't need a long, lofty introduction from me, who is an unabashed fan as you are. Save to say, as I told him on my radio program when we visited an hour on Friday, his music has come like a laser beacon of revelation to me in some of the darkest moments. When I've had doubts, when I've had anxieties, when I've had fears, when I've really wondered, is there any sense to it all? In golden moments, his music has connected to the deepest need in my spirit. If you felt that way too, then say hello, please, to Steve Voss.
Thank you. I am not Willie Nelson. I wish I were. Well, no, I don't. For the last 3 years, I've been doing a lot of these rallies. Met a lot of fine people. And I've heard more hateful rhetoric in the last 2 weeks from our president than I've ever heard from the tens of thousands of people at these rallies. There's a song about that. It's called You Reap What You Sow. Dad was working early in the mist and morning chill, over by the tractor, loading seed into the drill. He said, son, there's just one thing in life you gotta know. Always do the best you can, you reap what you sow. Across the open fields we saw the sunshine follow rain. The crops survived and grew up strong to carry years of rain. The fields of green moved gently as the wind began to blow. Golden waves remind me you reap what you sow. Reap what you sow, yes, you reap what you sow. Treat your seeds well, plant in a row. A seed gives its life for a new plant to grow. Treat your seeds well, you reap what you sow. Not too long to wait until the harvest came around. We worked each day and half the night to cover all the ground. Filling up the barn at home were mountains of pure gold. And Dad just turned and smiled at me. You reap what you sow. Reap what you sow, yes, you reap what you sow. Treat your seeds well, plant in a row. A seed gives its life for a new plant to grow. Treat your seeds well, you reap what you sow. A seed gives its life for a new plant to grow. Treat your seeds well and reap what you sow. Reap what you sow, yes, you reap what you sow. Treat your seeds well, plant in a row. A seed gives its life for a new plant to grow. Treat your seeds well and reap what you sow. Thank you. I did these songs because I love them. and because I love America. You know, since the Oklahoma City bombing, there's been a new game in town. It's called the blame game. Before the smoke had cleared, Bill Clinton was trying to make political hay out of the tragedy. And all of a sudden, talk radio became an endangered species. In so many words, he implied that talk radio was bad because it was filled with hate. But talk radio isn't filled with hate. It's Bill Clinton that's full of hate for talk radio. Because talk radio tells the truth. And Bill Clinton can't handle the truth. This is called talk radio. It's hard to find in the morning papers. It's hard to find in the magazines. It doesn't matter what show you tune in. It's hard to find on a TV screen, but it's on talk radio. The truth is on talk radio. Turn it on, turn it up as loud as it'll go. Talk radio. If you want to vent your frustrations, you got some things that you need to say. There's a place where people always listen. Go on, dial it up today. Talk radio. Truth is on talk radio. Turn it on, turn it up as loud as it'll go. Talk radio. Any little thing that you want to know, turn to talk radio. Anytime at all, anywhere you go, it's on talk radio. When double talk is all you're getting, then you wanna hear it straight. There's a place to find all the answers. AM, FM, shortwave, talk radio. The truth is on talk radio. Turn it on, turn it up as loud as it'll go. Talk radio. Talk radio. The truth is on talk radio. Turn it on, turn it up as loud as it'll go. Talk radio. Turn it on, turn it up as loud as it'll go. Talk radio. Thank you.
Now I'd like you to meet, if you would, ladies and gentlemen, the second speaker of this afternoon. I had the pleasure of sharing an hour with him on my radio program a couple of days ago. About this speaker, the legendary lawyer F. Lee Bailey said, "He is a person whose investigative skills are unsurpassed by anyone I know or have known." When I read that statement on the air, the light on the telephone panel went up very quickly, and I processed a call from Dale Gerbeau, who recently moved to our desert from Beverly Hills, where he had quite a luminary legal career and is quickly establishing himself here in the desert. And he just simply said, "I wanted to call to echo what F. Lee Bailey had to say, that indeed, in my estimation, your guest today is indeed the person whose investigative skills are unsurpassed by anyone I know or have known." Now, that's enough to get your attention. But let me share some other things about this gentleman. He was a special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation from 1951 through 1979. He first became the Special Agent Supervisor for the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. from 1960 through 1965. From 1965 through 73, he was the Assistant Special Agent in charge of New Haven, Connecticut and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. From 73 to 74, he served as Special Agent in charge in Memphis, Tennessee and Dallas, Texas. And from 77 through 79, he was the Senior Special Agent in charge of the Los Angeles, California Bureau of the FBI. Some of the other things that he's done that you need to know about. He has served as a consultant appointed by then Governor Jerry Brown for the California Narcotics Authority. During the LA Olympics in 1984, he was a special consultant for the LA Olympic Committee. And presently, he is the founder, owner, and operator of an international security consulting and investigations firm, which he established back in 1979. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Ted L. Gunderson. Ted.
Thank you very much. Ron, you have no idea how much money I had to pay F. Lee Bailey for that statement. But it really has paid off in my introductions. And Steve, where are you, Steve? Boy, you were great. He's back in the back there. You choked me up. You really did. Your songs plus what's been said here in the first instance by that wonderful lady. And I feel like I'm among a group of people who are going to be responsible for the rebirth of the greatest nation of all times in the world. And I want to tell you that it brought back memories, the songs and the speeches and what's been said so far brought back memories of when I was in high school and when I was in grade school and when we saluted the flag and we said prayers and we went to church. And I just have no idea. I do have an idea, but I just cannot imagine how our country could have deteriorated to the state that it's in today. And I'm very saddened by it. After I retired, I became involved in a major investigation in which I was an adversary to the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice. And I basically took them on toe-to-toe. I haven't won yet, but I'm in the process. I feel like I'm in the process along with the defense team of winning. And this is the case involving Dr. Jeffrey R. MacDonald, the former Green Beret doctor who was convicted of murdering his wife and 2 children, Fort Bragg, February 17, 1970. He did not commit that crime. I'm not up here to tell you about that case. But the government destroyed evidence, they hid evidence, they altered evidence, they withheld evidence in order to convict that man. And we're fighting and continue to fight even today. There is a new book out which I'm going to ask every one of you to at least look at in the library. It's called Fatal Justice. If you wish to see a classic example of how the government, Department of Justice in particular, is capable of performing, you go buy that book. It'll make you sick, because I know we're basically all here Americans and patriotic, and we like to see right from wrong, and we like to see the good guys win. We're going to win eventually. That case occurred 25 years ago, and that man's he's been in jail for 14 years. Getting back to the issue at hand, Ron, thank you very much for having me on your show the other day. And I really enjoyed it. And I really became involved in this case, this bombing by accident. I was sitting in my condominium, minding my own business, and I received a fax. And would you turn the light on over there, Peter? I received a fax, and this fax was from the Oklahoma Geology Department. Turn around so we can read it, will you, Peter, please? You're going to have to sweep it across the screen. Go over to the left. That's it. Okay. From the University of Oklahoma Department of Geology. And this fax was distributed throughout the United States. And I received this, and I looked at it, and I made a phone call to the University of Oklahoma. And I asked Dr. Ken Luza, what does this mean? And what this is a fax or a monogram from the University of Oklahoma seismology of the event that occurred on April the 19th, 1995. And I asked Dr. Luza to interpret this for me. He said that there were two sound waves, one at 9:02 a.m. and 13 seconds, and the other at 9:02 a.m. and 23 seconds on April the 19th, 1995. Now, this is at Norman, Oklahoma. It's located, I think, around 20 or 30 miles from Oklahoma City. These are 10 seconds apart, and of course, the sound waves, it takes 10 seconds to travel that distance, surface waves, and I said, what does that mean? He said, this chart indicates there were two detonations in the Oklahoma City bombing. I went back and I made notes. I repeated it back to him. 9:02 a.m., 13 seconds, 9:02 a.m., 23 seconds. Chart indicates two detonations. I said, okay, fine. I sat on that for about a day and a half because I didn't see anything like this in the media. And I kept waiting for the media to release it. Nobody released it. Having been in an adversary position before with the Department of Justice and the FBI and the U.S. government, I felt that I had to do something about this. And so I therefore called a very close friend of mine who I knew would know about this bomb. And much to my, not really, what did I drop? Microphone, okay. Not to my surprise, because I figured that my friend would know about this particular situation. He told me that when I described the seismogram to him, he said, quote, "That's my bomb." Now, what he was saying is that he initially developed this bomb years ago when he worked for the government. And so I went from there, and it was very obvious to me that the government who claimed it was a fertilizer bomb were not telling the truth, because fertilizer bombs do not have two blasts. They only have one blast. Put the next slide on, will you please? I subsequently received this document in my fax, which at the top says Geological Survey, and that's also from the University of Oklahoma. And this is a statement that was released by them. Now, in the meantime, knowing how the government has worked in the past, I contacted some people in Oklahoma and asked them to go talk to Dr. Luza and the university, and they said they already talked to him. In fact, they were in and discussed this matter with him on the 21st, which was 2 days after the bombing. And he confirmed and gave them the same information he gave me. They also said that there had been some other individuals go in and interview him. He gave them the same information. Bill Cooper, the talk host, talked to Dr. Luza, and Dr. Luza gave him this information on tape. This is on tape. In the meantime, I have received information that they have recused themselves. They claim, the University of Oklahoma claims that there were not two shock waves, and the statement has been made that the second was an echo, or also somebody claims that the University of Oklahoma is now stating that was the floors collapsing. The floors collapsing on the floor, coming down, hitting the ground level would not cause that, according to the technicians I've talked to. We'll put the first one back on, Peter, will you please? I'll explain a little more about it. I went through the step-by-step with the University of Oklahoma because there's some question about whether or not they've recused. I don't think they have. And I think this is a further attempt at disinformation, which is very common in our business. Now, going back to this, you see the circle around the two lines, the two events on the right where the lines are broken. And before that, you see another breaking of the lines. And up in the middle, you see two instances where the lines are broken. The ones in the middle, I asked Dr. Luza, are railroads. A train went through the railroad near there, and that's those two interruptions. And the one down below, prior to the two that are circled, by the way, the circle and 9:02 a.m., that's the writing at the University of Oklahoma. The first one there of the three is a truck that passed by very shortly about that time, just prior to that time. Now, I also recall in retrospect, that the day of the bombing, there were some people who claimed that they heard two blasts, but you heard it the first day and you didn't hear it among the media after that. And then according to CNN, 2 or 3 days later, there was a meeting taking place in one of the buildings 3 blocks away, and in that meeting they had a tape recorder on, and they claimed that there were 2 blasts. So I feel it's been fairly well documented that there were 2 detonations. And I might also mention that the people who went in on the 21st and talked to Dr. Luza told me that ABC News had been in and talked to the University of Oklahoma, and numerous other representatives from the media had been in there, and yet we still have not received this information officially from the press. Why is the media ignoring these 2 detonations? I have my own ideas, but worse yet, how about the FBI? They're not only ignoring it, they are denying it. There's one newspaper, I sent my fax out, and I'm going to go in and explain the bomb in a minute. I sent this fax out of the seismogram, and I sent a diagram of the bomb out, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. Everybody I could think of all over the United States. And there was, of all the print media in the United States, there was one paper that was willing to print it, a story about this and interview me. And it was the Muskogee, Oklahoma paper, and they're independently owned, I might mention. But I think another thing that aroused my suspicion is I noticed over a period of several days the government went from a car bomb of 1,000 pounds, then to 1,100 pounds. Then we went to a pickup truck or a panel, and then we went to a 24-foot Ryder truck. And we went from 1,000 pounds up to, now it's up to 4,800 pounds. In discussing the bomb with my friend, you want to put the next diagram on, please? He told me this is an hydrodynamic gaseous fuel device, otherwise known as a barometric bomb. Now this is an abstract, and it's been previously classified top secret due to the ease in which the device can be created. Technically, it is considered an aneutronic device, hence the designation Q clearance is required for information regarding its construction. Of course, there's not enough details in this diagram to make it classified. For the sake of security, the electronic detonation sequence shall not be described herein due to the complexity of the scheme. By the way, I'm not obtaining this from the manufacturer of the bomb. I'm obtaining this description of the bomb from his technician. Basically, the explosives itself is ammonium nitrate. However, the ammonium nitrate is detonated 10 to 15 milliseconds, or if you like, seconds, depending on how you want to set the timer, later in a secondary and more powerful blast. The first explosion is caused by the detonation of a shaft-like shaped charge made up of PDTN surrounded by another shaft of micro-encapsulated aluminum silicate. This internal component has been suspended in a tank containing 64 ounces or more of ammonium nitrate. The complete assembly resembles a propane tank with a zigzag-shaped wedge surrounding the outside diameter of the tank. Now, this is important. When the primer blast takes place, that's the first blast, the top of the tank flies upward and the bottom of the tank opens up into a flower petal shape. Immediately, the ammonium nitrate mixes with the shattered micro-encapsulated aluminum silicate to create an even more devastating explosive fuel cloud. This cloud is then energized with a high potential electrostatic field, resulting in the creation of millions of microfronts. The cold cloud is then detonated a second time with a PETN, not PDTN charge, which was previously cushioned from the first, but this is in error, by the way. That initially the technician had PETN or PDTN in both instances. One is PDTN, one is PETN. This time the cold cloud ignites, creating a shock wave which surpasses the traditional effects of TNT. The most astounding effects of this type of detonation is the immediate atmospheric overpressure which has a tendency to blow out windows to any structure within the vicinity of the blast. In further research in the matter, I talked to the builder of the bomb, and he stated in regard to the barometric bomb versus the fertilizer bomb. He stated the commercial ammonia nitrate, or the fertilizer bomb, has too much moisture to be effective, as was the situation in Oklahoma City. Even if a person knows what he is doing, it is almost impossible to prepare it with home mixing equipment. Commercial production of ammonia nitrate fertilizer requires a prill tower over 300 feet high. It would take huge process equipment to produce a 4,800-pound fertilizer bomb. The chances of a large quantity such as 4,800 pounds detonating is slim. What usually happens is the propagation from the initial detonation would be uneven, and it would scatter the bulk of the material before contributing energy to the bulk of the explosion. An improvised bomb can be furious, but an unconfined explosive charge is not going to develop the pressure necessary to demolish the Oklahoma City building. My source advised that an off-the-shelf Blue 82, that's an Army bomb, fully loaded, weighs 15,000 pounds, that's ammonia nitrate. Its optimum efforts would not be capable of inflicting the damage that occurred in Oklahoma City. An FBI agent, as you recall, testified at McVeigh's hearing that his shirt contained PDTN. It is claimed by the government that the rope used to tie the 55-gallon barrels was soaked in PDTN. My expert, in response to this, states that the rope soaked in PDTN would be unreliable and probably would not work, as the propagation would have been uneven and there would have been no way to shield such a blast. This takes electronic circuits of similar sophistication as would be required in nuclear weapons. This sophistication is not available to the average person. Most certainly, the militants do not have access to this. Where did this sophistication come from in the Oklahoma City blowout? The calculation of an unconfined device of 4,800 pounds does not match the damage in Oklahoma City. It would have been a confused and uncontrolled blast. Much of the energy would have canceled itself out. The overdriven detonation in terms of energy delivered from the blast was more explosive from the blast than the commercial energy, which is not the signature of the fertilizer bomb. The only bomb, other than the barometric bomb, that could have inflicted the damage done in Oklahoma City is what's known as the Soviet rag bomb. However, this did not have the signature of the Soviet rag bomb. The signature of the bomb used in Oklahoma went in energy from class A to C abruptly, immediately. A being the highest velocity, to C being the very lowest. The signature of the Oklahoma City bomb was not that of the fertilizer bomb, but it does match the signature of the barometric bomb. Now, PDTN, I'm going to explain that to you. That's a highly technical word. I can spell it for you, but I can't pronounce it, okay? It's about 35 letters across, I believe. PDTN is a high-velocity explosive used as a primer or initiating charge. It is high-speed, very sensitive, and used in small amounts. PDTN is not readily available to the public. He had it on his shirt, ladies and gentlemen. PETN is higher in velocity than PDTN. It is standard and readily available to the public. Both PDTN and PETN are used in the barometric bomb. Okay, I was fortunate enough to know the man that made that bomb, who happens to be a very good friend of mine. And by the way, he was also directly involved in the Inslaw case, which was mentioned earlier, another Department of Justice cover-up and fraud perpetrated by that agency. But I was also fortunate to have been contacted on May the 3rd, 1995, by a federal criminal investigator working on the case. Of course, his name and identity will remain silent. He stated the bombing was with a duplex charge. Just what I said, just what the University of Oklahoma says. Had it been ammonia nitrate or the fertilizer bomb, there would have been nitric acid clouds and none of the workers would have been allowed in the area without breathing masks. He stated John Doe 2 was vaporized by design, which meant he went up with the building. McVeigh is also a throwaway. He was apparently supposed to have also gone up with the building, but didn't feel compelled to give himself up at this stage of the game. He advised that the debris field was collapsed toward the crater. There was something inside the building, probably another bomb. It was a drop and shear charge. He looked for signs of ammonia nitrate or the fertilizer bomb, and there were none there. He further stated, Gunderson, you are 100% correct. So let's go back to the first day of the bomb, okay? The government initially put out the word, obviously disinformation now that the case is beginning to unfold, to look for two Arab-type individuals in a blue pickup truck. 90 minutes after the bombing, McVeigh was arrested by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. If you're involved in an operation of this type, and I've never been involved in a bombing, but I've been involved in a number of major cases, and you're on maneuvers, you're going to always rendezvous later with your fellow associates. Obviously, McVeigh did not, if he was meant to blow up, he didn't, but if he was meant to have a rendezvous, he didn't make the rendezvous. Then we had the artist conceptions. Put the John Doe 2 on there, will you, Peter, please? Then we had the artist conceptions. This was about 2 or 3 days after the bombing. And then the government put out word that there were 2 former GIs, and then someplace along the way I heard that they were AWOL. And I'm wondering to myself, well, if they know that they're ex-GIs and they're AWOL, they must know who they are. And then they circulated this artist's conception. Why are they holding back? I know if they have this artist conception, and McVeigh obviously was in the service, and the FBI has been in Kingman, Arizona, and said a man matching this description associated with McVeigh and Kingman. The FBI has been in Michigan. They've talked about this same man in Kansas, this same man, and yet they have never released his identity. Isn't that strange? If you really wanted to apprehend somebody, don't you think you'd put his name out to all the police and law enforcement agencies in the United States of America? No, they haven't. And then there was some talk about him having a microchip on him, an implant in his buttocks. And then he said he's a political prisoner. And then he said he wanted to talk to Sergeant Mack in Arizona. He didn't want to talk to the federal government. But the FBI won't let him talk to Sergeant Mack. And then I'm looking at this fellow, and I've watched him on TV, and I've seen his picture, and he kind of acts like he's kind of a robot, like he's kind of on automatic pilot. And then I recall some of the research I've been involved in, and I've been involved in research in this particular area, involving the CIA and the FBI and some of the nefarious activity by some of the elements in our government. And I recall the MK Ultra program, and I recall Project Monarch. Is there anybody here that knows what those programs are? Okay, anybody else? Okay, I'm going to give you a very quick education because I'm very limited. But I've talked to people who are part of the MK Ultra and Project Monarch program, and it's a secret government mind control program. They take these people in the service, they give them shock treatment, music, hypnosis, torture, whatever it takes, and they think they can control their minds. And then they give them a key word, and they may not use them for 5 or 10 years, but if somebody calls them on the phone and gives them this keyword, let's say the keyword is green, They've been given an assignment, and they are to carry out their assignment. It's much, much more involved than that, as you can well imagine, but it kind of makes me wonder about John Doe II and Mr. McVeigh. Now, also, this artist's conception, as you can see there, it's been brought to my attention in Soldier of Fortune magazine for June 1995 on page 50, that there's a picture of Robert Rodriguez, undercover ATF agent who tried to get his bosses to call off the ill-conceived raid on the Waco case. They made him a scapegoat, according to Soldiers of Fortune. And in this photo of Rodriguez he's being escorted in San Antonio by ATF agent David Aguililla. My Spanish isn't too good, high school and all that sort of thing. And an unidentified agent on the right who sat in the press section of the court with a burp gun under his trench coat. I've received word that there is possibility that this fellow, and this is the only thing I have as a facts of this, because I tried yesterday to 3 bookstores to find the June copy of Soldier of Fortune, couldn't find any. But you might want to buy Soldier of Fortune, the June issue, look on page 50, see what you think. And now we have the FBI placing Mr. Potts, who was in charge of Waco, in charge of the Oklahoma City fiasco. Another kind of interesting aspect of this is President Clinton made no public announcement for between 5 and 7 hours. And then he said, we cannot discuss it because of the problem of evidence, and do not jump to conclusion. Yet, disinformation has already been given out on the 2 Middle Easterners in the blue pickup truck. And they talk about video cameras on the scene that supposedly took pictures of the truck. Where are the video cameras? I mean, if I was in the news media, I'd have that in diagrams all over the place, and I'd have that information out. Why hasn't the media told us about that? And no comment has yet been made about, they're talking about no comments, not leaking information, and yet it can be documented that privately someone is leaking information to the ADL. They gain access to McVeigh somehow because it's now come out that the Spotlight publication, which is printed weekly, that McVeigh had a business card from the Spotlight on him. And then, of course, what does that mean? Well, that means, obviously, a disinformation program against the Spotlight. I'm sure some of you people here do take the Spotlight. Now, I gave a talk show on the 26th of April, and it was one of the first shows that I was on. And after the show was over, I was told within 15, 20 minutes of the show concluding, a phone call from the talk show host, that the owner of the station, I laid this out just the way I'm telling you about it, and I won't back up to it. I mean, I've got the facts. I've got the information here. I was told that the owner of the station came in and demanded a copy of the tape and said he was going to call the FBI immediately. And I said, fine, because I already faxed the same information to the FBI. And on the 28th, I received a call from ABC News. Excuse me, the first call was from the FBI. I received a call from the FBI, and in my fax to the FBI, I said, feel free to call me, and I gave him my phone number. But I've tried to furnish the FBI information before that clearly fell within their investigative jurisdiction and have been ignored, so I didn't have too much hope for this. Anyway, on the 28th, the FBI agent called me, and he wanted to know if he should furnish my fax to other FBI field offices around the country. And I told him, well, you know, if you want to, fine, but why are you calling me? And I was saying to myself, because I told him, I said, I've already furnished to everybody I can think of. And then he wanted to know, well, how you doing, Ted, and where are you living, and what's going on in your life, you know? And I said, well, I'm living right here. You got the number. Come over and see me sometime. And that was it. And then a short time later, I received a phone call from ABC News. And they apparently had heard about the information that I developed. and he wanted the information. He was in town, he was at a hotel, and I told him I'd fax the information to him. He said he'd call me after I faxed it to him. Never heard from him again. Now, I also might mention that well, I won't mention that. Okay, not that important. But it's interesting. I've been receiving playback from the media that the men in the field, the men behind the cameras and the interviewees and so forth, are complaining that when they send some of this information back to New York City and to Los Angeles, it doesn't come out the way that they tell it. So in conclusion, I feel very comfortable in stating that the government is not telling the truth. And it's very obvious that there is an organized disinformation program directed at the militia and, of all people, the talk show hosts. I mean, when you stop and think about the last election when we got rid of a number of incumbents, I certainly don't give the mainstream media credit for that. I give, and I've said this many times, the talk show hosts of this country the credit for that. I think that they... I think that they are the ones that changed it, that moved it, that got rid of the incumbents and brought some of the new blood in there. But that's why, of course, President Clinton is so angry at these people, because he does these people do make a difference. People like Ron make a big difference. A lot of people are listening to them. How am I doing on time? 5 more minutes? Oops. 5 more minutes, folks, but I've got an associate that I need to introduce, and very briefly, if you don't mind, now I got plenty of time. Okay, good. Wait a minute, just stay right there. Let me just say that there appears to be an effort, in my opinion, and this is strictly opinion, I cannot prove this, there's an element within our society that I feel has caused an incident to arouse the American people and to encourage and, in fact, insist that Congress pass anti-terrorism legislation for the purpose of further eroding our civil liberties and destroying our great Constitution. There is talk now that the FBI and the Department of Justice and the U.S. government need more anti-terrorism legislation, more manpower, more liberty to gather information, et cetera, et cetera. I have with me here the current guidelines of the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI in these type cases. I've looked at them, I've read it, I've been involved in anti-terror, in fact, I attended anti-terrorism seminars. I've been involved in counter-espionage cases. I've run the gamut in my 27 and a half years in the FBI. I assure you, 100%, these guidelines are adequate to enforce the law and to handle any terrorist situation which might occur in this country. Okay, now I need to tell you and introduce my associate. This is Suzanne Harris. She and I have been friends and associates and worked together for years. She has taught law. She has a degree in political science. I've been on radio talk shows with her. And she's made it a point as a loyal American and dedicated citizen to review and follow legislation that is being introduced and in some instances, unfortunately, passed in Washington, D.C. She's going to discuss this with you for the next few minutes. Come on, Suzanne.
I'd like to start by asking the audience a couple of preliminary questions. First of all, how many of you saw Oklahoma City coming? Okay, a few. right? We did. And the reason we did, we being my office, which is called the Law Loft, a think tank organization dedicated to preservation of the Constitution and the economic and political power of the middle class. The reason we saw it coming was because we realized a few years ago that we, the people, had nobody in the think tank business working for us. Scratch the surface of a reputable, established think tank and you will find multinational money. Scratch a little further and in 9 cases out of 10 you will find nothing more than a media disinformation campaign. Yes, think tanks think, yes, they gather together interdisciplinary study groups, but we don't get the data. We decided it was high time to put an end to that and establish one made up of the people, because after all, we do the work in think tanks, most of us on salaries, for the people, and do the thinking in advance that the multinationals do. In other words, beat them at their own game. Now, one of the things that we develop, because you really have to craft your own rules, they don't publish the ones that work, is a means of determining what signs that you read in the press and things that you hear in the media tell you about what's coming next. And I submit that although most of it is disinformation, as you all know, a significant percentage of that disinformation will tell you, if you understand how to read it, what's coming. So we knew by the middle of last year that there was going to be probably something called a Reichstag fire episode, and those of you who know about Nazi history probably understand that that means an explosive political episode, terrorist episode, calculated to buffalo the people into accepting the giving up of their rights. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that throughout the 20th century, most totalitarian regimes have come into place through the voluntary acquiescence of the people. Surprisingly enough, more liberty is lost through the ballot box than through tanks, right? So what you have to understand is what are the signs, what are the kinds of techniques that are used to create these episodes. We figured by the middle of last year there was going to be a Reichstag fire, there was going to be an episode calculated to try to catapult the American people into a state of panic where they would give up their freedom in favor of tyranny. By early this year, we figured out that the likely target group, that is the likely bad guy in this scenario, would be the militia. And the early warning signs were perhaps available to a number of you. Suddenly people like Donahue started inviting militia members to appear on talk shows. That's what's called a distant early warning sign of trouble to come. Tried to communicate to the Trockman boys the hazards implicit in this situation, and they said, oh no, we know how to handle it, not to worry. One of the frustrations of running a think tank, I'm afraid. We also noticed that the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has been described in court cases as an arm of the Justice Department, just as mean, as nasty as the Ku Klux Klan, but better funded and better educated. Well, we saw them sniffing around and sending out memoranda listing hate groups and listing militia groups based on the thinnest of threads, like once someone sneezed in front of a synagogue and therefore was anti-Semitic, that kind of data. That probably the militia was going to be the bad guy. Next, usually, in this kind of scenario, what you see is the legislative base, because, ladies and gentlemen, since most tyranny is lost voluntarily, in quotes, that means that there's a paper trail. And a significant part of that paper trail will appear in the public record. You don't have to go around corners, you don't have to steal things out of FBI buildings. It's there to be found if you have the patience and education to dig through the mountain of paper, because the way it's obscured is kind of like the way they hid the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It wasn't lost, it was just hidden amid hundreds of thousands of other boxes. Now, this year, in February, out came the key. That is the terrorism bill that makes sense of why you would have a Waco episode or why you would have an Oklahoma City episode. And for those of you who say, well, we think the militia did it, I can only say that's fine if you want to believe that, but use a little logic. In basic criminology, who do you look at, first of all, when you're looking for the culprit? Try the guy who benefits. Who benefits from Oklahoma City? Not the people, not the militia, but the government. Right? In fact, Ted will tell you that by January of this year in radio shows, I was warning people, this year it's terrorism. This year the issue will be terrorism because the end goal is an international court of justice that will take away all criminal law jurisdiction in the guise or under the argument that you can't fight terrorism without a new international court of criminal justice. That's the end game. Now, let's talk about the immediate game. In February, President Clinton had introduced in the Senate a bill called Senate 390. Its House analog is H.R. 896. The bill was so repulsive on its face that the man assigned the task of introducing it, Senator Biden, gagged as he introduced it and said in the congressional record that the bill, he was doing it because the president commanded him to do it, but that he was severely troubled by the bill because of the use of secret tribunals and the loss of liberty that it represented. I understand he's since recanted those words, but I have not found that. What I can tell you very clearly is you can see him gagging on the record in the February 10th issue of the Congressional Record Senate of this year. Now, what this bill does is it sets the concept of due process of law and liberty back about 1,000 years. It is one of the most disgusting pieces of legislation I have ever read. I have, concurrently with looking at the American record, been engaging in creating a new discipline of comparative law, which you've heard of comparative politics, but comparative law is, so far as I know, not an established discipline. And we have been comparing things like proposals in the American House and Senate with proposals that were put forth in the Weimar Republic at the point of transition between the Weimar constitutional federal system and the Nazi totalitarian system. And there are lots and lots of scary similarities. The one thing that's unique about Senate 390 is that when you compare it to the comparable legislation in Germany, this one's worse. On the face of the record, the protective custody order that was the operative document for most of the early Nazi period from 1934 to approximately 1938 contained better guarantees of civil liberties than this bill that President Clinton has offered to the American people. Now, people will tell you, senators and congressmen will tell you not to worry, this bill just deals with foreigners. It's an anti-abuse of the immigration code bill, and it's calculated to get people like the Palestine Liberation Organization terrorists, or the IRA, out of our country. Don't believe it. The language of the bill is deviously clever because what it says is it defines an alien as a non-American national, and it does it in terms of the immigration code. Now, without going into the details, which are really beyond the scope of the time that I've been given to speak to you, let me simply say that the way that alien is defined in this bill would include a majority of the sovereign citizens. Is there anybody here who doesn't know who a sovereign is? Okay, you do. Many sovereigns, as you know, declare themselves to be state citizens and have renounced their allegiance to Social Security, refused to pay the IRS, and also created various papers indicating that they are no longer subjects of the United States of America. Depending on the way that one does that, one falls squarely within the definition of alien under Senate 390. So when I talk to you a little bit more about what this bill really means, remember it's you or your neighbor or the person down the street that they're talking about treating in the manner that I'm describing. All right? Let's suppose that the lady in the front row in the black sweater is sitting at home one evening and there's a knock at the door and the INS comes and says, "We're going to arrest you as a terrorist." agent representative of a terrorist organization. And she says, first of all, well, how do I know that I represent a terrorist organization? And they'll say, because the President of the United States has determined which organizations are terrorist and which are not. And then she might say, well, what makes you think I'm their agent? And they'll say, because the Attorney General says that you are, and furthermore, there's no appeal of that determination. We say you are, therefore you are. Come with us, ma'am. And she says, well, just a minute, let me get my purse, the key element for ladies of your ID, or the wallet if you're a man. And they say, no, ma'am, we don't have time for that. Off you go. She is then locked up in a detention facility. Her lawyer doesn't get a phone call. Unlike the Nazi bills, her family isn't notified. There is no bond. There is no hearing to release her. She sits there until the process is done. While she sits in this jail cell, a secret hearing is held in the judge's chambers, in camera is the term for it, ex parte. That means one side only is represented. She has no lawyer present. Her lawyer doesn't know she's gone, let alone that the hearing is taking place. A representative of the Department of Justice hands the judge a series of documents and says, this is why we want this lady out. She's an alien. Again, as I said, it could be a sovereign. It could even be a mistake if it turns out that they've transposed a name or are pretending that she's an alien, because after all, she doesn't have the ability to even get a hold of her handbag to prove that she's not. All this is going on while she's locked up, and perhaps her family has no idea where she is. They provide documents that they say, because of national security, in quotes, can't be released. And the judge signs an order, rubber stamp, okay, throw her out. The next phase under this proceeding is that she is to be deported to a country that will take her that is acceptable to the United States State Department. Now, the trick here is that that's a double-barrel test that only the government controls. If they can't find anybody acceptable to the government who will take her, guess what happens? She stays in jail. Guess how long? Forever. That's right, forever. All the government has to do at that point under this bill is to send her a notice every 6 months saying, sorry, Charlie, we haven't found a country acceptable to the State Department that will take you. This ranks as the most reprehensible piece of legislation I have ever seen. Now, the catch is that when the Nazis passed stuff like this, they conducted polls, because generally even totalitarians would prefer not to provoke a revolution. So the key issue now is, and I realize sometimes people say writing to Congress does no good, but this time it's going to count. The key issue now is, can we generate enough public opinion, enough public perception to stop this juggernaut, to scare the politicians, to make them realize that this is not the moment to wrap up the Constitution and burn up the Bill of Rights. Now, I can't do this alone, but I can do it if you will help me, and I will help you to help me. At this moment, this bill is being rewritten in both the Senate and the House. At this moment, President Clinton is rewriting a new version which will have a new call number, which will contain the same provisions. We have to make it abundantly clear to these turkeys that we will not stand for this, that we are not buying this game, that we are not good Germans, and that we demand our rights. Now, I have here with me Peter, who will give you, we only have a few, I'm sorry to say, but who has a list of the phone numbers to call, the places to write, the places to fax. I assure you, this time it will make a difference. This time it counts. If this is the last time you ever write to Congress, make it on this issue. Because if we don't convince them that the PR blitz from Oklahoma City is working, our liberties are done. Okay, Peter, will you stand up, please? We've only got about 50 copies. So share it with your neighbors. It's also possible to get the same information in the library. You can go to get a copy of the Congressional Digest down at your government printing office. Okay. You can call the switchboard number.
What is the number of the bill?
The first bill is Senate 390. The second bill, which is the same bill, is H.R. 896. They are being rewritten. So the essence of your letter has to be, don't make Oklahoma City into the Reichstag fire. We're not Germans, we won't buy it. In other words, don't think that you can create a terrorist episode and destroy our country with it. Okay.
Ted has another comment. Ted?
You mentioned earlier on that they can't lock us all up. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but the federal government is right now presently building 80 new prisons around the United States.
We leave it to your fragrant imagination who will populate those unless you stand up and say, as Suzanne has said, we're not good Germans and we will not stand for this. Now, momentarily, since we're running a bit behind schedule, I'm going to ask if you will direct your Q&A, your questions for Suzanne and for Ted Gunderson, and we'll take as many as we possibly can. Yes, ma'am. The question from the audience here is, this lady thought that the executive branch of the government, that is President Clinton currently, and that's an aberration we intend to correct, was not vested by the Constitution to writing laws.
Well, actually, laws start out as proposals, which are called legislation, and the president is empowered to suggest legislation. However, he has to get people in the Congress to then introduce the legislation. That's why Senator Biden was basically gagging as he introduced the bill. There are lots of interesting sources of legislation that we've tracked over the last couple of years. A surprising amount of it, for example, comes from offshore. Maybe that's not a surprise to you. A lot of it follows United Nations guidelines, and then you can see the legislation popping up in country after country.
All right, the question for the closed circuit video, and you may want to take notes if you have pen and paper, where may you either reach Ted or Suzanne? Ted?
My address is 2118 Wilshire, W-I-L-S-H-I-R-E Boulevard, number 422, Santa Monica, California, 90403.
You could write to me care of the Law Loft, that's L-O-F-T, and that's General Delivery, Los Angeles, California, 900, say, I can't, sorry, 86999.
Repeat the whole.
Okay, so that's the Law Loft, General Delivery, Los Angeles, California, 86999.
All right, and quickly, because it is such of importance, I'll repeat those addresses for you. You can reach Ted Gunderson, 2118 Wilshire Boulevard, number 422, Santa Monica, 90403. Or you may reach Suzanne at care of the Law Loft, General Delivery, Los Angeles, 86999. This side of the audience, quickly. Anyone? Yes, sir, here. The question from the floor is reference to Ted Gunderson's reference a moment ago about the construction of several hundred new jails and prisons being constructed across the United States. The question point was, do you think that these institutions are meant for the incarceration of American citizens?
Ted and I have decided to share the answer. We did a lot of research on this at the Law Loft last year. The short answer is yes, but even as I said, in a totalitarian transformation, you have to have footprints in the sand. You have to have legislation or an executive order authorizing the behavior. And my feeling at the moment is that it's highly likely that a substantial part of that prison space is designed for sovereign citizens. Because why else would you really be writing this legislation the way it's been written? It's very trickily done because you think they're talking about immigrants, and the reality is that the way the codes intermesh with existing law, they're talking about sovereigns and your neighbor. I also think that it won't be too long before the federal government says, oh, mercy me, we filled all these prison camps with drug offenders and everybody else we can think of, and now it's too expensive to pay for. Let's make these jerks work. In other words, what I think you're looking at ultimately is forced labor camps.
There was an article, excuse me, you have something? There was an article in the Oklahoma City paper last June, and the article was asking individuals to apply for a job at the new penitentiary that's being built near the airport. And it said in the article that this is a transfer point for prisoners, and they would house 1,400 inmates, a maximum of 10 days. If you project that figure through the year, you're looking at over 50,000 people will be passing through that point, transfer point, every year. That's not a permanent detention. And in addition to that, there are 80, as I said earlier, 80 new prisons being built in America today. Yes, I think that that's the purpose of this part of it. Yes.
Also, Ted, we got copies of what purport to be the contractor's design for that facility in Oklahoma City, and it has sorting bins for men, women, and children, which is one reason why I think it may be the sovereigns, because if you look at the complexities of the immigration law, once you become an alien, the status of your spouse and your children can change too, which makes me, I can't say it's proven, but I highly suspect that it's that type of an idea, because the pieces fit, the puzzle fits.
All right, time for only a couple of more questions. Anyone over here? Yes, sir, there with the red shirt, red tie, rather. The question from the floor is, how does this tie in with what we've heard about Operation Garden Plot?
I do. Okay. I haven't seen all of Garden Plot. I've just seen like a little excerpt describing Garden Plot, and I think in my copy a couple pages were missing. But it's consistent. The difference is that something like Garden Plot is an administrative design, but you can't execute Garden Plot without legal authority. So you need something like the terrorism bill to provide the legal authority. Now, I should point out that there's also an anti-militia bill that's pending. And I think its number is 1545. Is that right? 1544. So you can assume that there'll be other nasties cropping up as well. But again, they can't make that a reality without either an executive order or the passage of a bill.